Tony, I want to thank you for taking the time to come in here and be on this podcast, even though you were kind of thrown under the bus by your sensei.
Yeah.
Right? So tell me, Tony, where were you born?
Well, firstly, thank you for sparing the time. I'm from Plymouth, which is part of Devonshire in England. It's a very famous naval port.
Okay. Are you English?
I'm English.
You're English, okay, because there's a lot of people in England that aren't.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Recently, my father did one of those DNA tests for
Right.
us. We thought it'd be interesting to find out if there were some dark, secrets in the family, and it came back 96% exactly where we live now. So it seems our family hasn't moved in
There's been a whole
centuries.
bunch of stuff. Yeah, okay.
We're there.
Tell me this: do you have siblings?
I have an older sister.
Okay. How many years different?
6 years.
So that would mean that you guys weren't that close when you were growing up.
Do you know, funnily enough, we were very close. Even though I would enter school, she would leave it because
Right,
it's right on that turn. But
Exactly.
where we're from, it's mainly a national park, and of course the sea. So every weekend we would go as a family, and she was my playmate, playing up on the moors or off on a boat trying to catch mackerel. So we're actually quite close, even though there is a significant difference.
Even now?
Even now.
Okay. All right. Does she have kids? A family?
No. She's a very smart lady, smarter than me by far. She married a gentleman who is very well set up, shall we say?
Okay.
So he does his investing, and she specializes in teaching autistic children.
Okay.
So that's kind of what she does, but she's semi-retired now. That's what she tells me.
So what was it like growing up in England? I know very little about that because being an American and growing up in America,
Sure.
There's one thing I'd like to tell you. This is you being English.
Sure.
Some people may not like this, but I think you'll find it quite amusing. I had my kids at the British school.
Okay.
For 3 years, and people ask me as an American, why did I have my kids at the British school? And I said it's simply because the English don't think they're superior to Americans.
Mm-hmm.
They know they are.
I was going to say, do you know, it's funny because people say England, of course, the Japanese define the whole of the United Kingdom as igidus, and it gets very confusing. Where I'm from, it's very, very colloquial. Okay. I'm from a very small area, very small population of people in that area. We have our own very strong accent.
So, like how many? Like, how big?
Well, I mean, the entire of the county is probably about, let's say, a max 750,000 people across a huge span. So I grew up mainly in towns with about less than 30,000 people.
So everyone knew everybody, basically.
Everybody knew everybody, and everybody, I mean, it was very Anglo-Saxon.
Okay.
And so
anyone that came in that weren't, you guys knew right away.
Oh yeah. I mean,
is it still that way kind of now?
It's changed. It's improved.
But just a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you mean? So that's improving?
Well, no. Look, I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, well, it depends on your definition. For me, we were so stuck in our ways. I think if you'd gone, when I was growing up in the 70s and you'd gone there in 1950, there would be no virtual change. You probably had better music, but that was about it. And I doubt if it had changed much.
So when was the first time you saw someone outside of being on television in real life?
You mean a person of color?
Yes.
Probably.
Or there was non-Anglo-Saxon?
When I was about 9, 10, and we went to Oxford.
Okay.
And I saw a guy who later, because I moved to, my parents moved to Oxford and I went to school there. And there was a family who ran the Chinese restaurant, Hong Kongese. And there were a couple of children, one who'd come back from Kenya. So a friend, Mark, who was black, and there was one kid who I think was Bangladesh, and that was it.
Wait, so when you went there with your family?
Yeah. So we've moved on a bit, but we're talking about 9 until I saw someone who wasn't, unless it was on a New York cop show or something.
But what was the feeling? What did you think? I mean, how did you react to it?
To be honest with you, on a personal level, it was okay. He's a nice guy. He's funny. We got on well. So it wasn't like massive. Oh, these people must be really, really different. I mean, you notice things. It fascinated me when I first met Mark. The inside of his palm versus the outside was fascinating.
Okay.
But
Mark was the guy, the black guy.
Mark was the black guy that first I met, and but he was a good athlete, and I was really into sports, and we hit it off and became good friends. But that's about it. So
you were going there to visit. You were going there to go to school.
So this was when I went. We moved. The family moved when I was 9 to Oxfordshire.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
you left that whole area.
So this was the big move.
Wow. What was the reason? I mean,
my father's job.
What did your father do?
So my father started off in the 60s. He ran supermarkets.
Okay.
And he was also in the Special Constabulary, which is, I don't know if you have that in the US. It's kind of voluntary police force, and they kind of use it to filter people to get into the police force.
Okay.
And so my father was doing that and working in the co-op, which is the supermarket. And then he moved into insurance because family connections. And then through his job to become a kind of regional manager, he had to move outside of Devon. And really, that was probably the first time my family had moved outside of the county.
Your mom, your dad, your dad.
Anybody.
So it's just as interesting. The whole family took this on.
It was huge.
So when you guys came home, what would the conversations be like? Look who I met today.
Well, firstly, I would get terribly teased because of my accent.
Okay.
There are certain things that I would say which were hilarious.
But do you have an accent now?
No. If I talk to my parents for a while, it would come back.
Why don't you talk to them while we're talking, just for a little bit?
So I'll give you two good examples: water and rubber. If I were to say that in my home accent, you get water and rubber.
Water and rubber.
Yeah, and it's much higher kind of pitch, and certain words you wouldn't use outside in them. If you say in them, it's like in Japanese you would say ne. In them.
Oh, you use that in between?
You use that in between.
Those are fillers.
Exactly. So I would, we come back and, my parents would be laughing at the fact that, the kids have been giving me grief over...
Because they couldn't understand what you were saying. No. And they really push it.
Kids
will really push it. Of course. They really pushed it.
When you're 9 or 10, they think it's hilarious. Luckily, I was always very, very tall.
So you could...
Yeah, so no one was going to push it too much.
Too far.
Yeah, exactly. So I was one of the biggest kids there. And it always freaks Japanese people out because I was 5 kilograms when I was born. So I was a very long child. And which for Japanese is just...
And your mom's okay?
Obscene. Oh, yeah, no.
Is your sister tall too?
No. That's the interesting thing. She's about, 5'4", 5'5".
And you're 6 what?
5.
6'5".
Yeah. There's a huge difference between us.
Wow.
Yeah.
You guys look alike though?
No, not really.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We both have. My sister very much looks like our mother, and I'm kind of a mix of my father and my mother.
And your mom and dad are doing okay?
Yeah, they are. Right. Thank you for asking. Yeah, we're very lucky again because it's such a countryside area.
Would they move back?
Yeah, so we jumped ahead.
Okay,
so we moved to Oxford about when I was 9, and then we moved back to Devonshire after 4 years.
Right.
Again, my father had done what he needed to do to come back to get his promotion to the next step, and so we moved back to Devonshire, which was great. And the connection for me always between that has been team sports. My father was very clear that for you socially, the important thing is for you to be in team sports. So,
what about for your sister?
No, so my sister was the academic. And I was the jock.
He'd read to her, and that would be it.
Yeah. So read the books, and then it was...
What kind of sports? So you did soccer? Well, you football. You did football.
Absolutely.
Did you do cricket?
Yeah. So, I mean, basically set it up by the seasons, right? So I swam year round.
Right.
Winter is for football, and then in summer you got cricket, athletics, and tennis.
Right. Was he there at all your events? Basically?
Every Sunday.
Making sure you were there, right?
Well, no,
Hey,
not that so much because
okay.
you needed to get the teams around. So the dads would always turn up with the cars to make sure the teams could get to the football grounds. Right. But yeah, I mean, I look back on it now, I just think, my goodness me, what a stoic. I mean, in British winters can be pretty grim. And the dads kind of standing on. I'm sure there were a few nips going around just to keep everybody warm. But
they had to.
They had it tough. Yeah, that's a good one.
Wow. Okay. So anyway, so you said you'd moved to where first?
We moved. I was born in Plymouth. We moved to Oxfordshire, a town called Didcot.
Okay.
And then we moved back to Devon to a town called Exmouth. So Plymouth is where the River Plym comes out, and the River Ex is Exmouth.
Good. Was that close to where you came up?
It was quite close.
Very, very close. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so how old were you when you moved back? So you were 9 years old when you moved the first time.
And I think I was 12 when we moved back.
Okay, and then that was it. You stayed there until...
And still there until university.
University. Your parents are still there now?
No, they just moved slightly down the coast.
Closer to where...
Yeah, to where they were born. And the reason is that they found a beautiful apartment. They have an apartment that looks out over the sea. It's stunning. So they thought, okay, well, we'll stay there. Yeah. But they're for their age, they're what, 75, 77. So.
Oh, they're still young.
Yeah, but they're in really good shape.
Looking good. Yeah. So what do they do? I mean, to keep themselves active.
My mother is an incredible socialite.
Okay.
She loves meeting people, and she gains energy from friends. And my father is really big into metal detecting. So he goes out because it's huge.
He has to detect it, really?
Goes out with a detector, bends down, just exciting.
What are some interesting things he's found?
A lot of coins. He gets a lot of coins. Some of them going back to the Elizabethan period.
Does he cash them? I mean, does he?
No, he collects.
He's keeping all of it.
Yeah. So I mean, the UK is very well established. So you get a find, you have to report it because half of it belongs to the Queen. Whatever happens.
Is that right?
Absolutely. It's her land. So then it has to be tabulated so people know where things are. So eventually maybe your collection goes to the Crown or it goes to a local museum, whatever. So it's very different, I think.
It is different. I mean, we don't know enough about it. I'm starting to learn more. All right, so then you go back and then you finish your schooling.
Yep.
And when you finish schooling, you just went up to what grade?
So I went to what they call a sixth form college.
Sixth form?
Sixth form. So between the ages of 16 and 18 in the UK, you basically focus down your education onto 3 major subjects, one of which you'll take at university. Okay. So it's not you've finished your general schooling at 16, and then you specialize. I was an arts major, so I did English literature as main, theatre, but I enjoyed psychology as well, so I threw that in. And then after 2 years of that, I went to Brunel University, which is just outside of London.
Mm-hmm. What's their specialty?
Actually, Brunel was founded as an engineering university, but certainly when I was there, it was incredibly well known for its sports and engineering. Less so for the arts, but to be honest with you, I just wanted to move to London. That was the big thing in my head because I'm a country boy, so I want to go and see the big lines.
And you were 18 at that time or 16?
Exactly, 18.
18, okay.
So university was super exciting, and living in London.
And you were boarding? Were you at the boarding school? Or?
So basically they have halls of residence, as they call it.
Right.
That was a unique time. I think it is for everybody, but I think the friendships made there and what you learn about yourself and what you want to be is just massively important. I mean, I'll be brutally honest with you. I was probably the least kind of academically bent. I took the subjects I took because I would always get good grades at them, even if I didn't try that hard. And I just kind of enjoyed them. But, the friends we have then, we're all still very much in touch. And, if there's a wedding, fly back to be with them. But I think what was really interesting about that group, certainly around me, none of them initially stayed in the UK. We all went to different places around the world.
But isn't that's very customary of most Englishmen anyway? I mean, you think of yourself as being an island nation. You've been all over the world.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I mean, first to start off when you guys were Romans. And then from there, Then, you gave everybody plumbing and good roads.
Exactly.
And then what?
Don't forget the trains. You gotta have the trains.
The trains.
Trial by jury.
Come on. Right.
So yeah, it probably is. It's much easier for us.
There's always travel. Yeah.
But it's still unusual, I think, for certainly my close friends at that period. We all, one friend moved down to Botswana to work on safaris.
And he's still there?
He spent 8 years, I think, there, and then moved back because his family run the safari companies. So he moved back to run that for them in the UK. Another friend moved to Germany, where he was doing theatre. And another friend moved to Whistler, I think, in I'm not sure where that is. And
Wisconsin, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we all, and obviously, as soon as university finished, I came to Japan, literally.
So how many years has it been now?
Since I first moved here, it was 26 years.
So you moved here. You had to move here when you were 24, 20.
No, 22.
22.
Yeah.
So now you're 48.
Correct.
Wow. And so straight out of uni, you decided to come here.
So,
had you ever been outside of England?
Yes.
Prior to that?
Yes.
To where?
Canada. I have relatives in Canada, in Ontario. I'd been to Spain, Greece, and France, I think.
Prior to coming here?
Yeah, we would always summer in Greece. That was my family loved Greece very much, and so did I. If that's the chronological order, the Japan thing started probably when I was back in Plymouth. I had seen an episode of Kung Fu. If you remember the David Carradine classic. And
the guy
at the age of 7, I had told my parents, I'm going to Japan.
Well, Kung Fu had nothing to do with Japan.
Well, there you go. The story badly starts then. So I wanted to lift an iron kettle and get the dragon over there. And so, and at that time, I think it was post Bruce Lee and everything. So I was wandering around in espadrilles, thinking that they were Kung Fu slippers. And so my parents were like, "Yeah, of course you do, son." So when we moved to Oxford, it happened that there was a judo club. So I started doing judo when I was 8.
The cauliflower ears. Wait.
Oh no!
You didn't do it a lot.
Well, that was the thing. So I did it while I was in Oxford. And then when we moved back to Devon, I was so involved because I was all on the sports teams at school with other sports. I stopped. But at 16, I had a very bad accident. I broke my leg and smashed my ankle to bits in a football match.
In a football match?
Yeah, it's quite a rare injury.
Wait, so after you fell, somebody jumped on top of you?
No, what actually happened was I had gone for the ball. My leg was hyperextended. The guy was trying to hit the ball, and he hit my leg, and it
just pop,
snapped. And that, firstly, that laid me out. But what happened was the bones didn't knit cleanly. So they said to my father, basically, look, we can either break them again and set it up properly, or he's going to limp for the rest of my life. And my father, who was quite an athlete himself, said, no, you reset it.
That's right.
So they broke it again. So I was probably in casts for about 6 months. And that meant I couldn't go back to football, and a lot of the other things I was doing, it just didn't appeal. And there was an Aikido club at my sixth form college. And I thought, I'll give it a try. And that rekindled this...
going to Japan.
Japan, And I actually worked out the difference between China and Japan.
At least you got Aikido. At least Aikido took you closer to where you're...
Exactly. And so, the university, I first visited Japan in 92 because I wanted to do some Aikido here.
Had you studied the language at all?
No. I knew Kotegaishi and Seiza, and that was about it. And I thought that...
That's more than any other foreigner would know.
Yeah, I was going to say, that'll get me there. And I was very lucky. I went to the Aikido school that I was associated with. And it was a super group of people there. And there was one gentleman who looked after me, a guy called Dan De Prospero, who's written books on Kudo. It's a beautiful book he's written for Gudanji. And, he really took me under his wing, and he was very kind. And he said, look, stop forcing this stuff and, relax, and it'll come more naturally. Let it happen, basically. He was California, actually. And...
real laid back, I guess.
He's laid back star.
Chill, dude.
But I actually met, the guy at the time. He was the first 10th Dan in Aikido. It was a guy called Tohei Koichi. And I met him really at a late stage in his life. He passed away a few years later. But I grabbed him and he put me into a puddle in the floor. I mean, it was astonishing.
You know, right then, this is no
yeah,
joke.
no, this guy knows what he's doing with his body dynamics. So that was great. And so yeah, I came back, continued Aikido through university, and then I came over on the jet program.
Okay.
So I was a jet.
Jet's international then. I thought it was just.
Well, my understanding was that jet was set up for native speakers of English.
Oh, right, of course, yes.
It's not just American English. So you got the Northern.
Now, Tony, tell me if you know this or not. This is just a little brief thing on history I heard before. That actually, the way the British spoke at first is the way that I speak. That's the way it started. Then they wanted to differentiate themselves.
Yeah.
And the royalty started speaking the way they're speaking now.
Yeah.
Which is not the original way English was spoken. It was spoken more the way that we speak it.
I heard the
Am
same
I correct?
thing. Certainly in
You heard the same thing,
in
didn't
Boston.
you?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because
That's what I
if
thought.
you remember, Plymouth is where we kicked out some undesirables.
Well,
And they
all
went
of
on
them, yeah, I know. And
to
that's
set
why
up a few
Americans,
things,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
So yeah, no, that's true. But I think also you've got to remember that our royal family, originally comes from Germany.
Tell me, it's still, yeah, very
Right?
much so, yes.
And then, the Queen, I think, is a quarter
She's
German.
Oh, she's German.
Her
Yes.
husband was Greek.
Right.
So it's not like the royal family,
Right.
absolutely pure Anglo-Saxon. So,
No.
yeah.
But it's not always the case, but still you have to set the image. You have to set the pace. You have to get the idea out there. And they did a great job. They said, no Catholicism, nothing else.
Sure.
We're having the Church of England.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Our rules are way.
Well, it's always funny. There was a wonderful piece of research I read, and basically what they did, they went around all the major cities in Europe, and they timed how long people could walk 10 meters. Just timed it.
Okay.
And then they put the prevalent religion, where it was in geographically, north, south, west. They looked at the amount of rainfall in that. And every stereotype you could possibly imagine was basically borne out by this.
You got to be kidding me.
So, an Italian in Rome would walk a lot more slowly because they're Catholic. They get, you say a few, whatever it is,
Got you.
you're over. The Europeans, it's damn cold. Everyone's moving quickly. They're more Protestant.
Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah, wonderful kind of pop culture study. But I think, for me personally, where I'm from in the UK is very Puritan. It's a Puritan side of it. And therefore, the work ethic, it's something I gained from my parents, is very, very strong. I mean, there's almost an always-on switch. And I think that comes from, if I don't work really hard, I'm not going to get through the pearly gates.
That's right.
And
the pearly gates are, what about the winter?
I think that comes, now that's more important, but historically, if you look at that line,
okay.
And I think there's a huge work ethic in that part of the world, which influenced me. But yeah.
So when you grew up, did you keep any of your childhood friends from the village or the area that you grew up in? None of them.
No.
You wouldn't recognize a one.
No. And I think what was interesting was when I was about 18, I went back to Didcot in Oxfordshire, which is where we were. And
is that where you were born?
No, so Plymouth, but where I spent 3 or 4 years. And Mark, who I talked about earlier, recognized me coming out of a store. He said he actually recognized my father.
So Mark's the black guy.
Yeah.
So he's still there?
He's still there.
He never traveled?
He never traveled. And he recognized my father coming out the store and then saw me and said hello. And it was the spookiest thing because we were there for one day.
Now, how long ago was this? Wait, how old were you during
18.
this time? You were 18?
Yeah, just before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just before you started to travel.
Yeah. And it was so weird. So that was really nice.
So you still keep in touch with him? Do you know where he's at now? Okay.
I'm terrible at that.
All right.
I'm terrible.
But when you go home to visit your parents, do you ever try to, look at some of the other areas where you came up?
My family also...
I'm sure some of the same buildings, I'm sure it does. In England, things don't change a whole lot.
Well, no,
the structures stay for a long time. Yeah, right. They stay there.
So all of my family, apart from my parents, all are still in Plymouth.
Okay.
So we would always go back Christmas anyway.
Is the home that you were in still up? Is it still there?
Yeah,
Okay.
where I was born. It's
Right.
still there. Yeah, I mean, that whole area hasn't changed much.
Okay.
So that's kind of weird. My grandparents passed a number of years back, so we don't go down as much now. If
Grandparents on your mother and father's side?
my mother's died very young. My grandparents on my father's side were into their
Okay.
90s.
Okay.
Very kind of hardcore. I mean, that age group of people, what they went through there,
Right, of course. Yes.
they're tough.
Of
And
course.
Granddad was in Burma in medical corps, and you know what he
He was
did
in the
thing-
service.
Yeah.
Okay. But
So-
your father, did he ever go in the service?
No,
Okay.
my father.
Because he's my age, so he would have been Vietnam almost. Your father would have possibly.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
he would have been of that
Vietnam.
age group.
Right. He would have
But
been.
we had a national service, it was called, in the UK,
Mhm,
that everyone had to do military service.
During his time.
No, he missed it by, I think, about a year. So it had finished, and then he came
Okay.
eligible.
Okay.
So he missed it, and that's why I think he wanted to be in the Special Constabulary, which is the kind of semi-police force.
Mm-hmm.
Because the country was kind of still rebuilding. Plymouth, being a naval town, had been blasted to bits.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very famous roundabout in the center of Plymouth where the old cathedral was.
Mm-hmm.
And the cathedral is in ruins, but they kept it in ruins as a monument.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go into the city, you're always reminded
About that.
of the war.
Okay.
Yeah.
The war. What would it be like for me if I went to your area, Plymouth? Now, today.
Well, two things. It is a very famous naval town, so you'll see that reflected everywhere.
Okay.
But what I think they've done a good job of is pushing the maritime history now. So if you go out, there's a lot more to learn about, the Elizabethan period when people were really going off and discovering new lands. And I think, you would find that, you'd find, a lot of fish and chip shops. Where I'm from, we have something called a pasty, which is our kind of national dish, if you will.
You mean England has a national dish?
Well, it's fish and chips, but where I'm from,
I thought, yeah.
it's just imagine a kind of calzone, but with meat and potato and vegetables in it.
Right.
And they used to give it
Substance food, yeah.
Yeah, basically, it was designed to go in your pouch, so you go off and work in the day in the farm, and you had something just to nibble on. It's our version of an onigiri, if you like. So you'd have that, I'm sure.
Now, if I went there alone, I mean, being who I am, if I went there alone,
Sure.
people would be very receptive and stuff. As soon as they heard me speak, what would they think?
Oh, as an American, you'd be, fascinating.
They would love it. They would love it.
Absolutely. They want to know where you're from.
And they'd want to know if I was in the movies or anything like that. They would go through all of that, right?
Yeah, where I lived in Exmouth, so from the age of about 12 onwards, right next to that was the Royal Marine Commando Training Centre. And because of that, you saw more people of colour.
Okay.
Because they were training to be Marines.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you people would be fascinating you in the movie business, you in the music business.
Yeah,
what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Once you go to a pub and the drinks are in, there'll be jokes about septic tanks and
everything.
and the Yanks and all the things that we take the Mickey out of.
That's right. I
Americans
take it out of Europe.
with,
But until then, yeah, they'd be as polite as they get back. Yeah.
No, absolutely. No, they're fascinating.
Right.
And again,
Right.
a lot of people visit that area as tourists because it's beautiful beaches when the sun's out, of course. And it's very different from where they are. It's the warmest part of the country.
Right.
So a lot of people come down. In fact, now I spoke to my parents yesterday, and they've never had so many visitors because people can't travel internationally.
Oh, that's right, of course.
So they're all piling down into what we call the West Country.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a big place.
Now tell me, Tony, what's kept you in Japan for 26 years?
Martial arts.
That was a clear answer, right?
Very, very clear. I came because I wanted to, from the JET program, I got the Monbusha scholarship to go to Tokyo University.
You went to Todai?
I was a Todai boy.
Wait. For how many years?
2 years. So I did postgraduate studies there.
Todai?
Yeah.
Wow.
No,
For those people that do not know, that's the Oxford of Japan. That's the, what else? Cambridge of Japan. That would be, yes.
Oxford and Cambridge. I don't know the American versions, yeah.
Todai.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
So here's the thing. It was very interesting. So I got here and I realized if I wanted to really deeply understand the things I was interested in, I'd need to learn the language. So for 4 years, I stopped reading anything in English. I only read things in Japanese, which is why I wear glasses to this day. My eyes are absolutely shot because I had to write kanji hundreds of times. It was, I didn't have a MacBook.
You've kept up with it?
Yeah, I still read and write. And so I studied that, and then I got into Tokyo University on the scholarship. But it was very interesting because, as you probably know, Japanese universities start at 18 and they still have 2 years of general education. And then they start in their third year into their focused area. And it was very frustrating for me because a lot of the people I was with really were doing things I was doing when I was 16, 17. So I actually found the course quite not fantastic. And I switched over what I was doing, and I wrote my final thesis on Carlos Ghosn, believe it or not.
Carlos Ghosn?
Yeah, because he'd just come to Japan and he was making massive changes in Nissan and firing people and doing, the big turnaround. And of course, 20-something years on, you're reading in a paper like, my goodness, what happened? Well, what a story. So to go back to your question, I've always been obsessed by the martial arts.
So what field did you go into? What did you graduate with?
So I finished off. I didn't graduate.
Okay.
Now, I had a choice to go on, and it was very clear to go through to get my doctorate, or I could go out and get some money.
And you chose.
And I really didn't enjoy the academia I had found at Toda. They are a super intelligent group of people, very focused, going to become the future
leaders,
Nobel Prize winners, etc.
Right.
But the level of practicality and what they were doing was...
You could see the writing on the wall.
I was not going to enjoy another 7 years of that, even, with the scholarship. So I got out. I found a Japanese company looking for a bilingual person to work with Toyota. So the company was called CMC. He was a very nice Australian guy who introduced me. And, it was my first job. And first thing they do, they flew me over to the US, to Torrance, to work with the Lexus team. And on the way back, they flew me...
To where?
Torrance in Los Angeles.
Torrance in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
okay.
And this is my first job. So, suddenly I'm in Torrance, Los Angeles. It's
and
great.
You've never been to the States?
I've been to the States.
Right.
Flew me back via Hawaii so we could...
Well, how long were you there in Torrance?
Only, I think it was a week there.
Okay.
And then flew back via Hawaii, and then I went over to Korea. So I was flying all around the world in this job launching Lexus in different countries, which, first it was a great brand.
Okay.
But secondly, the people you meet were fantastic. And so I did that, and then I thought, well, I'm really interested in marketing and communications, so I'll look and see. I was a bit worried about staying in a Japanese company. The Japanese companies have certain ways of doing things.
That's right.
So I looked for a joint venture, and I found a joint venture company between a company here, a major advertising group called Hakuhodo, and a British company.
Hakuhodo,
which was at that time called Low Lintus. So I worked with a company called Hakuhodo Lintus, and it was great. And I had.
What did you do there?
So I was an account lead. So I would look after the marketing communications plans for such exciting products as Domestos and Jif and Johnson & Johnson's Baby. Okay. So it was good. My day, I'd go and talk to mothers about rubbing baby oil on their kids, and go from there to something called AC Delco to talk about battery parts.
Right.
And go from there to Nestle to talk about Kit Kat sales, and then end up my afternoon talking about bleachers.
Wow.
And it was great.
And you loved it, yeah.
No, I absolutely loved it. And then you learn all the time, and you learn about people's behavior and what they say and what they do, two different things. But it's very funny. The first thing I actually ever did, in my first mail, I think, they said, "Oh, Tony, can you do an overview of the tampon and sanitary napkin market?" Oh yeah, specialist in that field. So anyway, I pulled out some books, and I looked up, and this is the size of the market and the scale, and these are some of the products. And they said, "Oh, brilliant! That's great, Tony. Can you tell us, are the tampons digital?" And
are they what?
Are they digital? And I immediately thought, I wrote back and I said, no, I don't think they've managed to put a chip in them yet. And of course, what they meant was, is it finger type?
Is it finger type?
A finger type. The shape of the product. Is it like
a digit? Oh, digital.
Digital.
Oh,
yeah, exactly, right?
Okay.
Exactly. And
I didn't. What, no. But how
well,
would you
exactly.
think that?
I was thinking, well,
What would you be thinking? That doesn't make sense.
well, it does if you're a specialist in the field. So anyway,
Who's asking you this?
So this was a team in London who were making products.
Is it digital? So the thing is, it digit? Is it the pop-up tap? Yeah.
Yeah, and I was.
What are the type of that? Wait. There's tampons. The tampons are always digital. I think it's the napkins that aren't.
No, I don't know.
Okay,
really,
but anyway,
not a specialist.
But that's what they
But the first thing I thought was probably like you is, well, they
that's
managed to embed a chip into it or something.
Right.
Yeah, and so I had no idea. So I sent it back, and they thought it was hilarious, and that became a running joke for the amount of time I was with that company. But anyway, working with an international company. Very unfortunately, I had joined the company 9 months later. The guy who had brought me in, the chairman, he had a major heart attack. Okay. And as they wheeled him out, after being there for 9 months, he said, I want Tony to take care of the business.
Here?
Yeah.
This was the Australian guy?
No, he was British as well.
British guy, okay.
And so after having been in the company at the Right Boat for 9 months, I think I was about 26 at the time, I was getting all the country manager mails. And one of the mails says, do you have any rising stars in your company? And I said, well, Antony Cundy has certainly shown himself to be
one of the best
of the highest qualities.
Right.
So they said, okay, that's great. Come for two weeks in New York for some advanced training. So flew over to New York for a couple of weeks, which is great. Met some phenomenal figures. In that time, it was a period of huge transition because there were just some enormous personalities in the business. I mean, they were just crazy.
Yeah, there always are.
And really a lot of drugs and alcohol, frankly, and they were the last of the generation. And the global CEO came in.
You think so? Yeah.
Yeah, and he was hammered, and he said, "Oh, you're all going to be millionaires," and he ran out of the room. Everyone kind of went, okay. Anyway, so 2 weeks and, just learning that was great fun. And then came back and it was very interesting. It was a time when a lot of international brands, so example, we worked with Gateway, which, is like a memory to people at the time. It was a big, powerful PC company.
It was for a second.
So they started doing it, and I got headhunted out of there to work with another company to run the Volkswagen business here, which was the largest international automotive brand. And it was a great opportunity. It was a wonderful brand, and they were very simple, made some beautiful work from the 60s onwards for the Beetle. And it was a pleasure to work on. The people were great.
Oh, you worked with them for how long?
So I worked with them for 4 years.
4 years?
Yeah.
What position? What were you?
So I started as leading the account, and then I became general manager. And then 6 months later, the CEO decided to leave, and they asked me if I'd run the company. So this is several $1 million
here in Japan.
company. Yeah. So I looked after that.
For how long?
I think it was about a year. I ran it. I told them, you need to get a senior Japanese person because, frankly, what was I, 29, 30? Running a multi-million-dollar company with a big margin, it's not good for the run of the company.
Right.
But it was a great experience. And as I said, for me, one of the great things was it was a company at its very heart that understood the power of communications for them. And I remember going in and some companies, they maybe choose 1, 2, 3 campaign visuals a year. We went in one meeting, we got approval for 12 different ads. And we made a wonderful television commercial for them, which was the guys flew down to Okinawa to shoot it. But Japanese TV spots are very loud and nice. I don't know why drinking beer is associated with drinking acid.
Okay.
Oh God, yeah. And so in the middle of that, we literally shot a Beetle from the front on a beach with nothing but the sound of the waves for 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And at the end of the ad, we just said this 15 seconds or 30 seconds, depending on the length that we bought, of peace was brought to you by the new Beetle. And
it flew.
And
It
was absolutely the opposite of what everyone was doing, but it was so aligned with it. Mm-hmm. So there were some great experiences. And in a creative business, you meet so many people. What's nice about the communications business is you meet so many people who have different skill sets from you. And that's really exciting. Mm-hmm. Not only because, and you'll have fights and there'll be friction.
Of course. But you'll learn so much.
Yeah, and you think, oh, God, I never thought of that.
Right.
And you find your way through the problems, not, in your way.
Right. Yeah. And then you sit back sometimes and think, I'm so happy the world's so diverse. Because if it was my way, we would be in a hell of a spot right now.
Well, you blink.
There's so many different places, yes.
But there are flashes of inspiration that come from all places. I think the best example, I was in New York, and we were given a task, and this sounds bizarre, but the task we were given was to create a campaign for testicular cancer awareness.
Okay.
And anyway, we decided, this team of 5 of us, we decided to encamp in the lobby of this big New York agency, and we were talking about it. And there was a lady on the reception, and she went, you know what? That sounds just like Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve. And everyone went, damn, she's got it. And her idea was to show an apple how an apple rots and say, look, that could be yours. Okay. That was the lady on reception.
Isn't that something?
No, it was wonderful. And everyone just went, she's crazy.
But that's because you guys were so perceptive to be able to pick that up for what it was worth.
Yeah, but she had the personality to say, you know what, guys?
It's an apple.
Brilliant. Absolutely
That's
brilliant.
Great. Now, when you were doing what at this time? You weren't. It was still with VW, were you?
Yeah, no, so...
that was part of...
In the advertising business, what you tend to do, and certainly in my career, you have a main account that you tend to focus on, and then you have a couple of smaller accounts that allow you, not to get tired of just focusing on other things. So, for example, I would work with the Canadian Tourist Commission. Years back, worked with Phillips on the shavers and Sonicare. And again, it's fascinating. Phillips is a great example. I still have good friends who are my clients at the time there. And, it's a Dutch company. And if it ain't Dutch, it ain't much. And they're engineers. And they really think, and, when you work with them, you have to understand that, you have your own way of thinking, your creative team's way of thinking, and they've got theirs. And your job is to help them see this in ways that they can understand, and therefore, it's always a people business. Even if in the end, you're creating a print ad or a digital banner campaign or whatever, it's about people.
From VW, where'd you go?
So within the company I was working, I worked for a company called DDB. I said, look, I've been here in Japan 13 years, but I've never worked anywhere else. And most of the people I have met, my clients, they've been into multiple countries. I'd like to do something else. And we had found a Japanese gentleman to run the office by that time. And they said, okay, well, we'll look for something for you. And suddenly they phoned me up and they said, what are you doing next week? I said, oh, I'm not that super busy. I said, okay, we want to fly you to Florida. So they flew me to Florida for McDonald's global convention. And, you go to McDonald's, it's an astonishing business. And, they don't, it's a machine.
They're not just selling hamburgers, that's for sure.
Oh, no, they say, you got ketchup in your blood.
There you go.
And so I met the guys who ran the business globally, and they said, well, look, we'd like you to move to London to run our business across Europe, working with McDonald's. So it was great. So I could go home and live in London. I phoned my mother up and said, look, I'm going to come back and we're going to live in London for a few years. And God, she broke down on the phone crying. I was like, oh, God. So I was based in London. That first year, I did 24 countries. I was literally bouncing across Europe. And London's setups, obviously Heathrow is a phenomenal airport. And, I'd get up in the morning and the taxi was there, take me to Heathrow. I'd fly to Amsterdam for meetings, go to the art museum there, get a bit of lunch, fly back, and have dinner at home. I mean, that's what London was like. And I landed just as literally a month later Lehman happened, and the huge economic impact of that. And everybody was being told, right, you're not flying, hotels, apart from me. And I remember the reasons, because everyone stopped going to more expensive restaurants. It was by McDonald's. McDonald's sales were going through the roof. So the CEO of Europe pulled me in and said, "Okay, Tony, you got no fly. Oh, mate, you're on McDonald's. Yeah, don't worry about it, and see you." So I flew everywhere while everyone else was worried about their jobs, and I ended up with more air miles than Harry Potter. I mean, it was ridiculous. People at Heathrow would wave and say, "Oh, Mr. Cundy, how are you?"
You're the only guy going. You and two other guys. Yeah.
Because McDonald's sales were just doing fantastic.
Just flying.
And it happened that I think about 2 years in, my parents had come up and we were talking about the future, and we'd just seen Lehman, and frankly, Western Europe was not looking in a good state. And my father said, "You really need to get back to Japan." And I said, "Dad, if you want me to leave, I mean, just tell me straight." And he said, "No. You should really think about the future. With your skill set. If you look, the future is Asia.
Have a whole lot there, right? He was very sharp.
England's going to be tough."
He was right.
And it just so happens, a friend of mine said, "Look, I know a guy who's going to be in London for a meeting. Why don't you meet him?" And I met this guy, crazy Aussie, very funny character, who was the CFO of an agency here. And we met for lunch. He said, "What do you know about Japan?" And I said, "Well, quite a bit." And he said, "Okay, we're looking for someone to run the strategic planning unit. Would you come back and do that?" And that was a huge move for me, because basically coming back to Japan after 2 years, I came back as an expat. So I had the package that went with it, the club membership, everything.
Which you didn't have prior to that.
I didn't have prior.
And you didn't even know it existed, right?
No, I knew. So I started coming to the club.
Oh, you've been coming to the club, didn't you?
With friends since 2000 or so.
Okay, so you know about the club.
But yeah, I mean, it was a different deal for me. So I came back and took over the strategic planning lead. We started winning.
For what?
So I worked with a company called Beacon, which
Beacon, okay, yeah, I know Beacon. Right.
So yeah, and we first thing we did, I won some business, and we started getting some momentum. I took over all the account services team as well, and yeah, we had a really strong few years. We rarely were beaten. Very strong unit, and good.
How big was your group?
I think in total we had about 300 people at the time.
All in Tokyo?
Yeah.
Okay.
And pretty much all of that rolled into me, apart from the creative teams.
And you were over this whole organization?
Yeah, and so there was a CEO there as well, who'd been there for quite a number of years.
Who are you? You weren't the CEO?
No, so I led the account services team, and then the strategic planning team, and then you had finance, you had a production unit, and the creative unit.
Okay.
And so, to be honest with you, the reasons I left was, there was a very glass ceiling. I couldn't go any further.
Right. Okay.
The CEO
it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, he was, and the guy knew his business.
Well, how long were you there?
So 4 years.
4 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
4 years with them, and then someone offered me the opportunity of running what at the time was the world's largest digital advertising network, which was called Wonderman. Wonderman. So it was
Wonderman.
Yeah, WUN. And so I joined that at a very tough time for them. Globally, they were going through massive global changes. But very interesting. I had been very much on the creative side of the business, so creating big style campaigns. And this was, a lot more about how do you develop CRM? How do you leverage data? How do you create data lakes?
What's CRM?
So it's customer relationship.
Okay, so okay.
Management, marketing.
Sorry, that's your talk. Okay.
Of course.
CRM.
And it was a lot more business to business work that I'd not done before. Okay. So that was a big shift for me mentally, and also becoming CEO properly.
Oh, so you became CEO.
So I became the CEO.
Okay. I mean, you came in that way. They wanted you to be CEO.
Yeah.
What happened to the guy prior to you, or personnel?
He had gone to become head of Asia. So he moved to Singapore.
So but he stayed up there. He just went, okay.
Yeah. And
so did you report to him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, super nice guy. And still keep in touch. He's a nice guy.
You still keep in touch?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, how long did you stay with that company?
So it was an interesting one because it became very clear they weren't interested in Japan. Japan was an afterthought in their global growth.
How long did it take for you to realize that?
Oh, a year of getting my feet under the table and when working out that really
they weren't going to move in one budget.
They weren't.
They didn't want to hear it.
No, weren't interested.
And how's the company doing right now, by the way?
They've gone through various. So globally, they I think were absorbed or became a JV with another company, as often happens.
Right. So they didn't go where they were talking about possibly going on their own. They ended up having.
They basically were in part of a larger group and then became kind of melded to another entity as well. And so a former friend of mine from my Beacon days had joined a company here called McCann. And he was, you should come over. So I met the CEO. I was like, And then they said, no, we're really serious. This is one of our top 3 markets. We want to invest in the market. And, long term, that's where I intend to be. And I said, okay, well, if you're serious about investing, I'll come on board. And the first thing we did, actually, we put a plan together for Japan, and we went to New York and we presented it. And the first thing they did was say, okay, we got some feedback on some of your plans, but we're going to give you, and I think originally the budget we had was something like $10 million, to completely redo your office space because we believe the environment's so important.
Wait, to redo your office space?
Yeah.
Wait, you were coming into a new company, right?
Yeah. So we just gone in, and so obviously there were people around.
Who's we?
So we had an executive team, right? So there was a group CEO, CFO, and a head of planning. And so we had gone over to New York to present this. And it was ballsy. So it's a whole plan.
I'm missing something. You went with another company where you're doing this, were you?
Yeah. So I'd moved and joined a new company after 2 years of Wonderman. I joined a company called McCann.
Okay, so McCann went in to present this proposal.
And we went to New York to present a proposal to say we're going to get Japan back on track, put the business where we want to be.
And you're talking to McCann.
And we're talking to the global CEO and the board.
McCann, I got you. So they said, fantastic, here's $10 million, redo your whole office.
Yeah.
And grow.
And grow, of course.
Did you do it?
Yeah.
How long did it take you to start?
We were back, I think we were in a very, very good place. By about 2.5 years in, everybody was rolling.
Well, they could see that happening then. They must have
see
been so
it.
happy.
They were coming over. The office space was great. There was energy.
Yeah.
There was new business rolling through the door.
I think you can make them very happy. How long do you stay with them? Are you still with them?
No. So so after 3 years, they promoted me to the CEO of the group, which at the time was about 750, maybe 800 people. And literally 6 months later, the first cruise ship comes in Yokohama.
You mean the Princess the Diamond Princess?
Diamond Princess, I think it was. Oh, and then a couple of months later, I was, online with the company saying, "Look, everybody's got to go home, and everybody's going to work remotely from now on. This is not looking good." And it's interesting that the group.
You brought me right up. Go ahead. Go on.
Yeah. So I mean, it was an interesting time because parts of the group.
Are you with them now?
No. So I left. I took a package in March to move on because they restructured.
Of 2020.
2021.
Oh, you just took. Oh, so you actually stayed with them all the way through. I mean, you stayed up until. No, you didn't leave right away because that happened. That happened 2020. Yeah. When you're talking about when Princess Diamond came, that was in December. No, actually January or something like that.
But that was a huge change because up until then, you're working with clients, the business is building, everything's going, and suddenly the brakes hit on everything. And parts of the business, for example, the event business, where that was strongly hit because you couldn't do anything.
Of course, yeah.
So parts of the business were doing fantastic, other parts were struggling. Working a plan out of how to get through that for everybody was just tough.
So what happened? Where are they now in Japan? Why did they pull out?
No. It's a big company.
I know that.
And
but I mean,
you know, it has a fantastic health. So no, they're smaller like everybody else is.
of course, yeah.
But the key thing was really to streamline and focus on the areas that were going to grow anyway.
Right,
So,
right.
for example, healthcare and digital businesses. And then the regional and global plan was just really to remove a lot of kind of overlaps that we
But
had
you
in the
always get
business.
right.
Which
Hoping that you would expand with that overlap.
yeah,
eventually,
but I mean,
you
you need to you know go on a diet at some point. And so we did that, and we put the plan together, and I was part of a big new business with them as well. And you know,
They took care of you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
and I took care of the business.
Right,
I mean,
of
it was.
course, I know it works both ways. It has to.
And
It
and,
has
to be,
to.
and it was a very amicable thing. I have a great respect for the people there. They're good people.
Right.
And
Well, they'll be with you continually. I'm sure you guys are going to cross each other's paths.
absolutely. And you know, this is the nice thing about that industry. You know, I've met so many talented people. I'll give you a great example. I remember so a young lady joined the company, and she's a Japanese lady. She's got blonde bob hair, you know, really funky character, and always come in. Raku-chan, we always call her, and I chatting with Raku-chan. She's creative, and I said, oh, you know, I can't remember, just chatting about something. And I said, oh, so what do you do on the weekends? You know, what's your passion? And she said, I do tattoo art. Just, you know, a little cherubic face Japanese girl with a blonde bob. I said, what?
She took off her sleeves.
No, she didn't have any.
She didn't
only
have
did
any.
the
She
art.
did she only did the art. Okay.
She only did, and she came out with this portfolio of her work, and it was mind-blowing.
I can imagine.
Beautiful.
You know,
and just looking at it, my goodness me, what a talented girl. And you're just looking at the work and thinking, my God. You know, and you know, having the opportunity to bring in, because we were taking on new grads. So funny, so up until I was there, they used to have a very clear new grad program, which was, you know, an interview, and I would sit here stiffly, and you would sit stiffly, and there would be 5 rounds of that, and we might let you in. So I decided to change that, and it was funny. I think, so the last one, instead of doing this, we got everybody in, and we did a group seminar. And honestly, you could tell within the first 5 minutes
who's who.
Because what I did was, I said, you got different tables for people around the table. And I said, okay, you see there's a pile of paper in the middle of the table. You got 3 minutes to make the largest tower you possibly can with the paper. Go. And it was fascinating because the speed of some of the kids to understand what you were asking. One lady, she threw off her shoes, jumped on the table and said, right, start ringing. And you knew, right, that girl, we want her.
We need her.
She's poof, she's
no joke.
on it. You saw a couple of the others go, no, actually, this is the way we can make it taller. So in 3 minutes, we had them up and running, and they loved it. You know, it's not, you know, if you're an international company saying that you're selling
creativity. Good way to
creativity.
find out real quick. Oh, man.
It was good fun.
And it'd probably be a lot more to the point and find out what the people can really do than sitting down one-on-one. You still don't know.
I don't know.
Those are just words, but you're watching the action.
Practicality.
Of people.
That was good.
So what are you doing now?
So
Let's bring us to the future. I mean, to now. Not the
well, I'm
future.
just finishing up my gardening leave.
Your gardening leave.
Yeah, so there's a bit of time that you have between companies to
oh, that's what you call it. Okay.
It's called a gardening leave. And then, so I start a new gig in September.
You already know what it is.
I am. I do.
You can't talk about it though. All right. In September, you start a new gig.
Yeah.
Here in Japan.
Correct.
In Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
My goodness. All right. That's wonderful.
It's been a good ride. And all through the background has always been the martial arts.
And you will continue to do that. That's your way of life.
Absolutely.
One of your ways of life. That's good.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, Tony, look, I mean, I can't ask you what your future is going to be because I already know it's going to be with this company, making the company whatever you're going to, better and better and better. I'm sure that.
Let's hope so.
I want to thank you again for taking the time to come in here, Tony.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Fantastic. All of you watching this podcast, make sure, did I say that right? Because I always get in trouble for this. Watching this podcast, make sure you press like, subscribe, and remember, it's all unknown. Continue to reach for the stars, and you're too blessed to be stressed.